Good morning, everyone. Mwah. Just gonna have a little sip of my water. Good morning. How are you? How's the first day of 2021 been for you? So today the theme is Awakening Shakti Day 2. The fruits of feminine archetypes. So for anyone joining us today for the first time, I'm taking you through over 9 days, the 9 themes that I teach to in the Awakening Shakti Depth Mentorship program that's starting actually on January the 10th, so quite soon. So today's theme, second theme, is the fruits of feminine archetypes. So this module comes second because it's all about basically exploring your light and your dark, your shadow and your light. So in the awakening journey, which is ongoing always for all of us, what is required is that it happens even if we want it or not, actually. But everything that has been unconscious is brought to the surface, is brought into our awareness so that we can integrate, so that we can remember who we are, so that we become whole. We are always already whole. We're born whole. We are whole, except the conditioning teaches us that we're not, and we forget. So there's this process of remembering, and part of that process is bringing the shadow, which is simply that which we weren't aware of. You know, I used to have this big fear around talking about the shadow or darkness because I thought it meant that I was a bad person or there was something wrong with me, and that was a really deeply ingrained conditioning from growing up, once again, in a patriarchal culture and also in a Christian culture where there's all this emphasis that's put upon sin and shame. You know, shame is a really powerful control mechanism, but it serves, the only purpose that shame has is to keep us small and diminished and to distance ourselves from our true nature, which is love and wholeness. So when we remember who we are, there is no shame, there is only self-love. And those parts of ourselves that have been forgotten or repressed because we thought that in order to be loved, we had to hide those aspects of ourselves. Or, you know, any of you who is a parent or who has been parented, which is everyone, you'll remember those times when your parents or your teachers or your guardians made you feel guilty for something which you quite innocently did as an expression of your beingness, right? And so if that happens repeatedly, and sometimes just once, that part of you, you're going to begin to suppress and hide, right? So shadow and light, and the light is your potential. It's who you really are. It's what you're here to become. And we always have, there's always this dance between both of those aspects of our being, always, you know, me too, always. I would never trust a teacher who pretends to not have any shadow, because that's just not possible as long as we're human. We all have a shadow, so, you know. And so it's really important that we become aware of this. We bring it conscious so that the awareness of our shadow and light is no longer something that's just happening to us or something that we react to, so that it becomes an aspect of our personal growth that we are willing to face and work with consciously, so that we expand, so that we heal, so that we resolve issues that have perhaps been limiting us or holding us back from something in our lives for years, for decades even, right? And so where does the archetype come in? Okay, so you will probably already know this, but there's different ways that we can conceive of or work with archetypes. And I focus on feminine archetypes, although of course there are masculine archetypes, and we look at those when we come to the section on meeting the masculine in the 8th month. But so, for example, an archetype could be a subconscious persona that is operating through you, or like you could call it perhaps a sub-personality, but it's something that's operating, a personality or a mode of behavior that's operating unconsciously, that you will have picked up from your family, your religion, your culture. So for example, I'll give you one just so that it's, you know, I think examples are always really helpful, but like the good girl. You know, I had the good girl programming, which meant behave, be nice, be kind, put others first, don't swear, you know, all those kinds of things. The good girl, do your best, get good grades. It's a collective archetype, and it's sort of part of my subconscious that still operates sometimes, you know. And then I catch myself and I'm like, oh, you know, that's actually not my authentic self. It's me trying to be the good girl. So there are these subconscious personas which typically will be interlinked with collective archetypes, which if any of you have studied Freud or Jung in particular, who talk a lot about the subconscious, they're like these collective models or even energies of a particular behavioral pattern, and these collective archetypes are woven into fairy tales, they're woven into myth, like for example Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, like the ugly sisters, the wicked stepmother. These are archetypes. You know, the wicked stepmother, think how many times there are jokes in contemporary culture about your mother-in-law, for example. You know, so but there's so much meaning and energy behind an archetype that is much more than the title that you would give it or the image that you would give it, right? So there are these collective personas that are there in myth, in storytelling, in popular culture as well. Look at music videos for you know, famous rock singers, pop bands, and so on. They play with these archetypes. You know, the whore. One really common, can't really do this live without speaking to, like one of the most common archetypal splits for the feminine is, of course, the Madonna and the whore, right? It's the most simplistic one, but it dominates so much of culture, so much. And that programming goes really deep, so that women have this split within themselves. I had this too. Most of us do, until we bring it conscious, right? Which is that we feel that we're expected to be a whore, as in we're always up for sex, we want to be attractive, we want to be desired. And on the other hand, there's this huge guilt and shame around embodying our sexuality. You know, that comes from religion, which is like, it's bad, it's naughty, it's dirty, right? And so that is so ingrained in so many women, and it goes all the way through into your body. So when I'm teaching Dancing the Goddess or running my Awakening Shakti workshops, I can see immediately if that is in a woman's body, because she's locked in her pelvis. She can't move her pelvis freely. Her body isn't flexible and open, not because there's anything wrong with her body, but because that is frozen in the shame of moving the hips and the body in a way that feels sensual, because of the fear of judgment for being so lascivious, right? It's a very strong programming, the Madonna and the whore complex. And men have that too, and that's why men sometimes find it hard, or often, to relate to women, because they project this ideal of the Madonna onto women, and then there's this like gap because they also want her to be the whore. You know, how about that program Snog, Marry, Avoid, which speaks to these archetypes very, very clearly. You know, there's the one that you would marry, the good girl. There's the one that you would fuck, basically. And then there's the one that you would avoid because perhaps she doesn't conform to society's norms of attractiveness, which is all bollocks. So another way in which archetypes play out for us is in the divine energies of goddess archetypes, or even animal energies. So some of us have totem animals as well, but I particularly have worked with the Mahavidyas, which is a collection of 10 goddess archetypes in the Tantra yoga tradition, as well as with, I'm a priestess of Rhiannon, so she's a goddess from the Celtic tradition, but basically I'm initiated as the priestess of Rhiannon within the Magdalene Mystery School. So in fact, that's within the lineage of Mary Magdalene. And so I work personally with Mary Magdalene, with Isis, and with the Mahavidyas, the 10 different aspects of the divine feminine that are spoken to through the Tantra yoga tradition. Now, you can read about those, all of these different archetypes. There's so much information available about them. But when I teach to those in my Dancing the Goddess practice and in my Shakti yoga practice, it's not just about something that is intellectually understood or theoretically understood, although that is important too. These are energies that we can tap into and embody. So each of these archetypes comes with an energy and comes with a message for us to explore in our consciousness and in our beingness, in terms of how we live and where we are operating from the shadow feminine or the divine feminine, or the light feminine, I should say. So we can inquire with these goddesses to see, and I'll give you a concrete example in a minute so it becomes more real, but I want you to know, if you don't already, that these are not just abstract concepts. These are real energies that we may embody. And as our Shakti energy begins to move and rise and flood through our being, these manifestations of different archetypes will and can happen quite organically. So, for example, on one occasion when I was in a Tantra workshop and my Shakti energy was flowing through my body, Kali, the goddess Kali, manifested in and through my body. When that happened for the first time, I had no idea that that was even possible. And I really didn't know much. I hadn't studied the Mahavidyas at all. Somebody had probably mentioned Kali to me once or twice, and that's all that I knew. So it wasn't like I was performing anything or enacting anything. It was the organic movement of Shakti through my body that manifested as Kali. And that has happened many times since. And now that I know what's going on, it didn't even freak me out then, to be honest. But so this is what can happen. And those of you who've been to my Dancing the Goddess workshops, you'll know, again, as we danced with and embodied those energies, that it's a feeling, it's a sensation, it's an involuntary, to a certain extent, though you can always control it, movement of the energy of that goddess through the body. And she will bring gifts. So say, for example, if you wanted to attract more abundance into your life, you can connect with Goddess Lakshmi. She will bring gifts, but she will also bring to your awareness where you're operating from the shadow. So if you're working with Lakshmi, she would be inviting you to look at where you're operating from greed, where you're operating from a perspective of lack or neediness, and so on and so forth. So we take these archetypes into our lives, into our self-inquiry, so that we can illuminate our shadow, and also so that we inspire ourselves to grow in those areas where we wish to grow, to heal in those areas where we wish to heal. So we work with the archetypes for illumination, for healing, and for elevation as well. It's an ongoing process. It's never ending. The Shakti awakening process is a spiral. So it's not like we go up a ladder and we get to the top and we're there. When we work with Shakti energy and the awakening process as a woman, it's a spiral path. So we're always spiraling up. And then we spiral down, but it's not like we ever really go down because the spiral itself is moving up. But there are moments when we go down into the darkness and we come back up into the light. We go back into the darkness, we come back up into the light. And we have to do this process. It's like the journey into the underworld. There's that myth of Inanna's journey into the underworld you may have heard of, where she has to travel down beneath the earth and go through the darkness, confront her own shadow, have this big initiation, and then come back up. And if you look, these archetypes are also directly connected. So each of these themes interrelates with the cycles. So tomorrow's theme and the third theme of the course is your cyclicity, cycles, stages, and natural rhythms. If you look at the cycles of nature and the cycles of your body, these will interrelate with aspects also of the archetypes. So for example, another way of conceiving of the archetypes as a woman is you're looking at your cycle, your moon cycle. So you would have the maiden, you would have the creatrix, you would have the mother, you would have the crone, or before the crone, the marga. So there's usually 3 or 4 archetypes that we can look at as we move through our menstrual cycle. And you can work with those archetypes as you move through your cycle, because knowing that is where the energy is. So the energy of the crone, however old you are, it's irrelevant, is there for every woman. The wise woman, the woman who goes inside, the woman who's able to connect with the other realms because the veils become thinner as she bleeds out, right? The crone energy is there, available to everyone, whatever your age, just as the maiden energy is available to everyone, whatever your age. But as you go through your cycle, you work with these different energies and they connect with, roughly I'm dividing it into a circle with 4 quadrants, but of course not everyone's cycle is exactly 28 days. And when you come to menopause and perimenopause, there are, again, I'm in menopause now, there are particular archetypes that can be really useful to work with as you make that transition, and then as you step through the veil into that next stage of your life. So I would be classified as a crone, but also a marga, so I'm still a mother, I'm still working, I'm not in that classical old-fashioned way, like retired, sitting at home knitting jumpers, not quite yet. Can't imagine myself ever doing that, actually. But still, as a 56-year-old woman in menopause, as a mother, I also embody still, and I always will, the maiden, the wild maiden, the sexual snake dancer, the lover archetype, the mother archetype, the queen archetype. So I am all of these, as are you, and it's just really, like I say, healing, illuminating and elevating to play consciously with these archetypes and to begin to become aware, for example, here I am being this. Is that my authentic self, or is that just, an archetypal persona that I've acquired from culture, from society, from my family? Has somebody said something there? I can't read. Sorry, I really can't see if there's any comments at the moment. And so, yeah, I think I'm just going to look at the time. Yeah, I don't want to overrun time. Don't want to be too long. That kind of gives you an introduction to this theme and how we play with it and how we explore ourselves and use the archetypes for our growth. And it's a super powerful juncture, really, to bring all those parts of ourselves that have been unconscious perhaps for a very long time, conscious without shame. There's been, for so many of us on this growth path, there can be shame. Shame is such a limiting emotion, and it can be really healing to be in a space where we're able to show ourselves in a safe space where there's only love, and bring those scattered parts of ourselves back to lovingly integrate those shadow aspects of ourselves that we've denied, and to look to where we want to go and be inspired and take courage and take qualities from those archetypes that really call to our soul in this moment. I have oracle cards. You know, I've got about 3 different sets. I'm sure many of you do as well. I often work with these goddess guidance cards, but there are so many other types. So that can be another wonderful way to tune in. And I want to give you just one more example, actually, of how this is real. It's real. It's not fantasy. It's not just an intellectual exercise. So one of the ladies in this group, and who was taking my Dancing the Goddess course a few years ago, was having some real challenges in her life, dealing with the authorities over the education of her son with some learning difficulties, or special needs, I would say, rather than that, actually, not learning difficulties, but, you know, special educational needs, and feeling very challenged by having to constantly confront the teachers, the local authorities, as a single mama, you know. And so in the Dancing the Goddess, as we were working through the Mahavidyas, we came to Durga, supreme, powerful mother goddess, warrior goddess. You know, if you want to invoke power of the supreme mother, who will take no bullshit and who has a very passionate driving force to campaign for change, you can invoke Durga. And she did. And Ma Durga really came through in her, as was needed, in writing letters, in communicating verbally, in one-to-one meetings with people, you know, where there's a bit of a power imbalance and it can feel challenging. And through that support, by working with that energy, she managed to get the result that she wanted for her son. So, you know, this is real. It's not make-believe, and there's an infinite world of power and energy that is available for us to tap into. Once again, this wisdom has been so hidden, but it's there for each and every one of us. So to conclude, I am just going to draw a card for us today, because I've kind of run out of time to guide you in an embodied practice this morning. But as we work with this in the course, everything that we do has an embodied practice element, because I know if you just read a book and intellectually understand things in your head, it's not going to affect the transformation that is needed, which has to be in and through the body, right down to the cellular level. Otherwise it doesn't stick. It's just, just heady knowledge, really, which is great, but it needs to go all the way through. So I'm really rubbish at shuffling cards. But let me just see what comes up. So I'm just going to call, and this is something you can all do again if you don't already. It's enough to just call and invoke with sincerity, with sincere intention from your heart, for guidance, for an embodied awareness, for a sign, and it comes. Trust, you know. So I'm just going to ask for a card for all of us for today in this theme of feminine archetypes. And there's one making itself very plainly known. Of course, I get this one so often. Well, true love is the card that we got today. And the summary message is, got to put my glasses on. The romantic stirrings in your heart have propelled the universe to deliver great love to you. Well, I'm not going to read the full thing now. Maybe I'll post it below. But the thing I would say about that is, first and foremost, this is just what comes through me right now, is that love is for yourself. That love, let it be for yourself, particularly when you're working with the shadow. Let that love be for yourself. So forgiving all those parts of you that you felt ashamed of. Forgiving everything. And letting that love flow and flourish in your heart for yourself. So Queen Guinevere came to share her love with us. I'll post the full text of the card below in the comments. And if you have any questions or insights or reflections on what I've spoken to, then pop them below. Love to engage with you. And thank you for being with me again this morning. Tomorrow, by the way, before I go, I'm going to be live at 5. So tomorrow's theme is cycles, stages, and natural rhythms. So see you at 5 tomorrow. Lots of love. Namaste.